Actually, hold on.
But we
This is
also
the original video they posted. Okay, 4 days ago.
did something different. In this family, we may have a child that able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual, so he's going to have work requirements. He's going to get a job, and it's going to make the life easier.
Damn right. Republicans admitting that, of course, is House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, admitting that the top goal for the Republican.
When you are doing your research, are you already thinking about the response to your response? Like the hypothetical that Cenk will watch this research? I don't think Cenk will watch anything of mine. So the first thing I do is I listen to their take on it so that I understand what their talking points will be. And then I just do research. So we just read some articles, listened to videos, saw some comparisons between the House and Senate version of the bill. And now that I have more information on it, I'm going to go back and rewatch their thing to see how much I agree with or disagree with. I don't usually set out to like research just one particular point of view. I just want to gather more information, and now I'll go back and re-listen now that I'm, yeah.
Republican Party is to put those damn kids to work. How dare they sit on the couch and collect those welfare benefits? Now, of course, he was on Fox News to discuss the debt deal that he and Joe Biden have agreed upon. Now, the real question is, will Congress pass it? And if you think that Joe Biden did a good job in negotiating this deal, you would be mistaken, because Republicans got everything they wanted, and apparently it's still not good enough. They're looking to squeeze a little more in terms of austerity. So let's give you the details on what we know so far.
So this is what I'm curious about. They're saying Republicans got everything they wanted. What did they get? So from what I know, Republicans got work requirements on, I think, SNAP, which is food aid, right? Upped from 50 to 54. So not a big deal. They got clawback on some unappropriated COVID funds, which, does anybody care? They cut 20 billion off the 80 billion IRS funding increase over the next 10 years. Slightly earlier / guaranteed student loan repayments. Yeah, is that it? It doesn't really seem like a huge win for Republicans, given how crazy 2011 was. Oh, there's a ton of stuff outside for you.
Did you not take it in?
So this deal, as it stands today, does in fact include austerity. It includes work requirements. It even has some goodies, some surprise goodies for Senator Joe Manchin and his energy-related projects. So let's get started with what I think deserves a lot more attention, but has not been getting much attention in its coverage: the pay-go provision. What is that? Well, the bill text applies Congress's pay-as-you-go rule, which requires new spending to be offset by savings elsewhere, to executive actions. That would mean presidential actions like student loan forgiveness would require a huge offset.
Pay-as-you-go, pay-go provision. What is this? Provision known as statutory administrative pay-go has been introduced in the debt ceiling deal struck by House Speaker McCarthy and President Biden. According to this provision, whenever discretionary regulation increases direct government spending by $1 billion per period of 10 years, $100 million annually, federal regulators will be required to find offsetting spending pay cuts. While this regular pay-go requirement is a positive towards promoting fiscal responsibility, it requires further strengthening to ensure its effectiveness at controlling regulatory costs. First, the provision grants excessive waiver authority to the Office of Management and Budget Director, making it susceptible to frequent waivers based on political pressure or whim. Specifically, the director can waive the requirement in case where it is necessary for the delivery of essential services or necessary for effective program delivery. To close this gaping loophole, Waivers should be limited to emergency situations only. Moreover, ideally, small impact rules. Without oversight from the courts, regulators will not be held accountable for non-compliance with the PAYGO provision. Introducing judicial review would finally includes a sunset clause, means it will expire at the end of 2024. Oh. PAYGO requirement that sunsets at end of 2024. Okay.
Do you guys understand what's happening here? So the PAYGO provisions, which have already impacted Congress, essentially say, if you want to push for, let's say, an executive action or a piece of legislation, you have—
This is already in effect. The PAYGO rule just codified an executive order made by Trump. Did Trump's PAYGO thing apply to executive actions? The Administrative Pay-As-You-Go Act of 2023 implements statutory PAYGO for administrative actions, executive order. Oh, okay, so.
President Trump actually put in, we took it, put it in statute now and made it stronger. That's good going forward long-term on both sides. But that's helpful. When you look at PAYGO, I think it doesn't matter who's in power, Republican or Democrat, you want to make sure the Constitution works, that the president, whoever it is, be it President Biden, be it President Trump, that can't go around. This was an executive order that President Trump actually put in. We took it, put it in statute now and made it stronger. That's good going forward long-term on both sides of the aisle. So I think people will look back and say, oh, I didn't get exactly what I wanted, but
okay, so PAYGO is not a big deal.
Spending elsewhere to offset the new spending for this new initiative, this new policy. It is a very convenient provision for Democrats to point to as an excuse for why they do nothing for you. Oh, the legislative filibuster, what could we do? In this case, PAYGO. Oh, the PAYGO provisions, what could we do?
So this point doesn't make any sense because PAYGO's already been in place since October of 2019 from Trump. If I'm to understand this correctly, this just doesn't make any sense.
It's just a convenient excuse, and of course Biden agreed to it because he wants the convenient excuse.
Wow, Sunday Lizard, welcome to the Tier 4 Supper Clubber.
So that's just the beginning, tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to get to. Cenk.
Yeah, so every part of the deal helps Republicans, including the Joe Manchin part. Progressives got absolutely nothing out of it, but it's not just about progressives. Democrats, other than Joe Manchin and his dirty energy deal, literally got zero, nothing. So if you're seeing in the press, oh my God, it was a wonderful compromise. There was no compromise at all. As you'll see here, every provision got worse as the negotiations went further. The headlines were so misleading. I thought maybe Biden clawed something back from the Republicans. No, he gave them even more.
Yep.
I don't understand why they keep saying this. It got worse, he gave them even more. When the House bill was so much more extreme than what actually got passed in the Senate. But maybe he's about to justify this.
So, and look, I said from day one that Biden wasn't gonna do anything in the next 2 years. That was super obvious. It was always obvious before they even lost the House, but after they lost the House, it was an absolute guarantee. But the media does the thing of like, oh no, you never know. Biden cares about a lot of things. He's trying really hard on a lot of things. He wasn't trying anything on a single issue, right? And so, but as Anna's pointing out here, once you put in PAYGO, it's over. Now it's technically, legally, nothing is ever going to get done in these next 2 years that would be part of the Democratic agenda. And Biden, the media will lie to you. And they say, oh, he did a wonderful bipartisan conference. No, Biden is thrilled.
Super thrilled.
Because then he doesn't have to bother pretending to do things he was never going to do anyway. He can just go campaign for himself, the only person he cares about.
Exactly, so think about this. In Congress, because—
Like, bro, Biden is like 80,000 years old, and he knows he's 80,000 years old. Like, I doubt he's looking after his own personal whims as much.
Of PAYGO, because of ideological divisions, nothing ever gets done unless it has to do with major handouts to corporate power, right? Like various government grants in the form of the infrastructure bill. It all tends to benefit the corporate world. The only way that we get anything done these days is if
Are they saying the infrastructure bill benefits the corporate world? I mean, corporations are what like do all the work. I don't understand how it would go any other way.
The president, a Democratic president, passes something through executive action, and PAYGO basically nixes that. But there is one caveat that I want to make sure you know about. So for instance, the text says that the White House Office of Management and Budget could waive the requirements if necessary for the delivery of essential services or necessary for effective program delivery. So it's just the executive branch's version of the parliamentarian in the Senate. Right? In this case, it would be the Office of Management and Budget determining whether or not the executive action is worthy enough to do without the PAYGO provision taking effect. All right, let's move on. There's a lot more to get to, including what we all kind of expected to happen, which was the cap on discretionary spending. So as Time writes, negotiators agreed to cap annual discretionary spending for 2 years, keeping non-defense spending levels flat next year and raising them by 1% in 2025. Okay, that's a fancy way of trying to say they're capping spending when it comes to any government program that benefits ordinary Americans, which is it's a cut, basically, because when you take into account...
Am I crazy, or doesn't defense spending benefit ordinary Americans too? Where does most of defense spending go? 2010, this is the 2010 military budget. Operations and maintenance, military personnel, and procurement. I'm guessing, like, is procurement probably like contractors and shit?
Count inflation, it ends up being a cut, but they're going to continue raising spending for defense specifically. That means...
Okay, let's do talking point and counter. So the work requirements were upped from 50 to 54. However, it increased the amount of people eligible, namely veterans plus homeless people. So the SNAP spending will actually increase. Clawback on some unappropriated COVID funds. Who cares? These funds weren't being used anyway. No big deal. 20 billion off the 80 billion IRS funding over the next 10 years. The IRS's mission will largely go unchanged. They can fight to claw back the clawback in the future. Student loan repayment was going to happen at the end of the summer regardless. And for PAYGO stuff, this was already enacted by Trump. Sunsets at end of 2024 anyway.
Funding for most domestic program spending for...
2-year spending cap. Originally in the House bill, they wanted a 10-year spending cap. Negotiating this down to 2 is pretty significant,
Defense specifically. That means funding for most domestic programs such as housing, education.
Hold on. No judicial overview, no judicial for spending, or I'm sorry, for determining when to overrule the PAYGO rule, I guess, whatever.
and road safety initiatives will stay the same next year at around $936 billion. And again, by staying the same, it's really a spending cut because of inflation.
Can somebody tell me how this works, where you make you do a bill and you agree on like not increasing spending? Could you theoretically just pass another budget that increases spending in the future? Like, is it illegal to do that, or how does that even work? Where are my government people at? It's just the benefit of future negotiation pressure. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
So let me give you some more. The work requirements are, of course, part of this deal. So for those who rely on food stamps or SNAP benefits, which amounts to about $6 a day, they will have to prove that they are working in order to get that.
Okay, so this is something that Jenk said earlier, and I hope that I'm misinterpreting them, but we're gonna find out as we listen to them. It sounded like what Jenk said earlier, and it sounds like what Anna is saying here is they thought that there were absolutely no work requirements whatsoever. They thought that there were zero work requirements for these, and now there are a ton of work requirements, whereas in reality, it only increased the age from 50 to 54. I don't know if they were aware of that or not, but we're about to find out.
Benefits, which amounts to about $6 a day, they will have to prove that they are working in order to get those benefits, okay? So the deal also raises the age limit until which able-bodied, low-income adults.
Okay, they're reading the text of the bill at least. That's good.
Without dependents would be required to work to receive food stamps from 50 to 54 years old. The expanded restrictions would expire in 2030. So if you are a 50-year-old and you're having difficulty getting a new job because of very clear age discrimination that obviously impacts people in their 50s.
Isn't unemployment right now like 3.5%? .4 to 3. I don't believe that anybody is having trouble getting a job right now. I don't believe that. I'd be interested to see numbers if I'm wrong, but.
Too bad, between the ages of 50 to 54, you would not be qualified for food stamps, even if you're having difficulty finding a job because of these work requirements. Yep. It's unbelievable. Except with this Democratic Party, very believable.
Okay, quick note on that. All the standard corporate Democrats, including Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the Democrats in the House now, said there's no way that they were going to cut include work requirements. And we told you, no, they will definitely do it. In fact, I made a bet with Emma Vigeland for $100. I was positive they were going to do work requirements. Why? Because I know Biden's legislative track history and his presidential track history. He always agrees to spending cuts from Republicans, always, 100% of the time, and always gives them more than any negotiator thought was possible when we first started the negotiations. Of course they're gonna do. So okay, Hakeem Jeffries, let alone the progressives, all said that it would not stand. Looks like it's standing. So who was right and who was wrong? And is Hakeem Jeffries fighting back now? No, zero, nothing.
In fact, just a quick reminder, I believe it was last week, Hakeem Jeffries came out with a statement, all of a sudden changing his tune and saying that the work requirements are reasonable.
But I was curious about how, in your most recent video, you commented how you disliked veneers. Can you elaborate on that more?
If you want to get them, it's fine. I just think that like the glowing, exploding white teeth is kind of weird, but I mean, I guess not.
All of a sudden, all of a sudden get a call from the donors. Oh, remember, this is not about the debt ceiling. This is a wealth redistribution plan to take from the people who have the least and give it to people who have the most. This doesn't even necessarily reduce the deficit. The whole thing is an utter sham. There are actual facts in the world.
Right.
You know, right-wing media and mainstream media take those facts and pervert them to no end. But there are things in this here. Here, I'll give you another one. So they were the IRS funding. Now that's the one thing I gave the Democrats a ton of credit for, $80 billion over 10 years, not over 1 year, okay? So that they could increase the audits for people making over.
The unemployment rate for people aged 50 to 54, or 45 to 54, is 2 point. Holy shit! All these numbers are so insanely low. Oh, unemployment is for these ages. I'm surprised these people are counted. Are these? Is this the U3 or the U6? The numbers are low, so this must be the U3. Huh. That seems kind of weird. No, it can't be because of school, because U3 unemployment isn't supposed to include quote-unquote discouraged workers. So it should include somebody that's going to school and not looking for a job. Unless it's all like high school dropouts and people who are kind of life, maybe. Students are counted towards the number. Wait, really? No. Labor force participation rate is closer to the U6. But that labor force participation in U3 is not the same thing. What is this cuck shit? U3 is the most commonly reported rate of unemployment in the United States. U6 includes everyone not accounted for in the U3 rate. Discouraged, underemployed, and unemployed workers in the country. So U3 is just people that are looking for work but can't find it. The U6 is going to be your overall labor force participation rate, which will include things like students and stuff. I would be surprised if students were included in the... I can just Google this. Are students included in U3 U3 rate? Unemployed workers are those who are jobless, seeking a job, and ready to work if they find a job. Note that labor force does not include jobless or not seeking work, such as full-time students, homemakers, and retirees. Okay, yeah, no, it shouldn't. Okay. It's only if they're looking for work.
$400,000 a year. Now, that's the one thing I give Democrats a ton of credit for, $80 billion over 10 years, not over 1 year, okay? So that they can increase the audits for people making over $400,000 a year. Those are unfortunately, the wealthier cheat on their taxes by far the most. So for every dollar you put into the IRS, you get $6 back in revenue. So that's what the nonpartisan governmental organizations agreed to, right? So what did? They weren't supposed to touch it. Then all of a sudden Biden said, okay, maybe we cut it by 10 billion out of the 80 billion. Okay, so all of a sudden we are touching it. And then the latest deal, I mean, the headlines say, amazing, partisan, and Biden got an amazing deal. It's now, they cut it by 20 billion.
Yep.
It got twice as bad. Where's the amazing deal part of this? Guys, you can go back and see the earlier articles. They're all archived. First they said none of this would happen. Then it was 10 billion, now it's 20 billion. There are facts in the world. Mainstream media is lying to you. This is a terrible deal.
And we've been saying from the very beginning that everything Republicans were...
He looks like an angry... I'm not doing a personal stuff, but just his demeanor. He looks like an angry, like, he just looks like that. I don't know why, it just looks funny to me.
Terrible deal.
And we've been saying from the very beginning that everything Republicans were promoting, everything Republicans were demanding would be provisions that Biden would eventually agree to, and that's exactly what happened. So for instance, when you're cutting 20 billion from the allocated 80 billion to ensure that wealthy tax dodgers are paying their fair share, what do? What does that do? That 80 billion from the allocated 80 billion to ensure that wealthy tax dodgers are paying their fair share, what do? What does that do? That aids and abets the tax dodgers. That actually means that we're gonna lose revenue because of the tax dodgers doing what they do and dodging their taxes. Democrats were bragging about how the extra funding to the IRS to ensure the wealthy were paying their fair share and were not dodging their taxes, that would actually increase revenue by $200 billion. That's what they were saying.
Now it's gone. So now, by the way,
to some extent.
Well, how is it gone? Yeah, to some extent. Let's chill.
Yes.
And the 60 billion left, you're talking about, oh, don't worry, it just goes to bureaucracy. No, it was supposed to go to the audits so that we stop the tax cheats and we get extra revenue in so the deficit is not as bad. Instead, on average, I mean, finish the math on it, 20 billion times 6, according to, again, nonpartisan groups. That means they put $120 billion hole in the deficit. Wait a minute, I thought this was about deficit reduction. It ain't about deficit reduction. They cut from the poor and they give to the rich.
This is a wealth redistribution bill. Cenk mentioned that perfectly earlier today because it redistributes wealth, I mean, what's left of wealth from the bottom to the top. right? This is a way to aid and abet the tax cheats. This is a way to continue increasing defense spending while imposing caps and austerity on any other government program that helps ordinary people. I mean, they're hyper-focused on work requirements for the needy, for people who rely on food stamps for sustenance.
$2 a meal. They're cutting it when it's just $2 a meal. They're like, that's too much for the poor. But we have to give everything to the rich. Now, hold on, we're not done yet. Let me speed through the rest of it for you guys. So again, deficit reduction, my ass. No, the military budget goes up 3%. Why? Because that goes directly to defense contractors who donate to both Republicans and Democrats. This doesn't reduce the debt. It's just to give to the rich and to the donors. And so that part is not deficit reduction. That part sucks. That's exactly what the Republicans want. Now, the one part that the Democrats got, was the Mountain Valley Pipeline. That's the one that Joe Manchin wanted, right? That Anna referred to earlier. Notice progressive priorities like paid family leave that would help you when you have a baby, higher minimum wage, higher wages for all of us, wages get pushed up. None of that is ever carried over. Once it's dead, it's permanently dead.
That's right.
But this son of a bitch, Joe Manchin, has wanted this all along, and Joe Biden broke every promise to progressives, every promise. But to Manchin, oh yes, put it in that one, put it in that one, put it in this one. This is like the 8th bill that they've put it into. And they're gonna sneak it in because it helps fossil fuel companies and donors and sons of bitch conservatives like Joe Manchin. That's who Joe Biden is. The media is 100% lying to you. More cuts, $30 billion from the COVID bill. They had already passed it. The Democrats already did a victory lap. Oh, we got your money. Oh, just kidding. $30 billion back. We got to give it to the rich. We can't have it lying around for that.
Where is it going to the rich in? Or what do you mean?
Average American, gone. Every part of this is a disaster. Speeds up energy projects. Does that help the deficit? It has nothing to do with the deficit. Just helps oil and gas companies. Right. Oh, look at that, the donors are helped again. Right. Guys, the facts are obvious.
Exactly, just to shed more light on the energy projects. Basically, there used to be, currently, there are multiple government agencies that need to sign off on new energy-related projects because they need to look into how it impacts the environment. I know, believe it or not, there is some oversight in regard to the environmental impact of some of these energy projects. Well, according to this new deal, it would cut out many of those government agencies that would oversee these projects and approve these projects out. So there is look into to sign off on new energy-related projects because they need to look into how it impacts the environment. I know, believe it or not, there is some oversight in regard to the environmental impact of some of these energy projects. Well, according to this new deal, it would cut out many of those government agencies that would oversee these projects and approve these projects and just rely on one government agency to give the green light. And I guarantee you, in every case, they will give the green light. It just makes it.
Okay. Joe Manchin. I don't even know how to spell his name. It's not Manchin. It's Manchin. Pipeline deal.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Subaru and the 2023 Subaru Forester, featuring standard symmetrical all-wheel drive and award-winning safety technology. The SUV for all you love. Learn more at Subaru.com.
The House has voted today on a deal to raise the country's debt ceiling.
The Senate is expected to vote in the coming days. We are going to focus now on another element of that legislation because the deal also includes changes to a bedrock environmental law and approves a controversial natural gas pipeline. Jeff Brady from our climate desk is here. Hey, Jeff.
Hi there.
Hi. So this natural gas pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, how did this end up in debt ceiling legislation?
The short answer is compromise, with the Republicans holding a narrow majority in the House and Democrats a narrow majority in the Senate. Including approval for this Mountain Valley Pipeline gives fossil fuel allies something they can claim as a victory, and that increases the number of lawmakers voting for the debt ceiling increase.
Aha.
Yeah, West Virginia's delegation wanted this, including a key Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin. This pipeline would transport natural gas from West Virginia about 300 miles south to North Carolina. The project has faced opposition from activists because it would be a contributor to climate change. And there have been court challenges from local landowner and environmental groups. And Jean Sue is with the Center for Biological Diversity, and she still hopes this provision will be removed before a final vote.
The debt ceiling bill is here to actually deal with the country's debt and our fiscal issues. And we shouldn't have big pieces of pork shoved into this deal like the Mountain Valley Pipeline.
But the Biden administration has signaled in recent weeks that it supports finishing the pipeline for what it calls energy security reasons. Looks like adding this is a strategic move to gather enough support for the debt ceiling deal in the House and Senate.
Meanwhile, the debt ceiling bill also includes changes I mentioned to one of the country's key environmental laws. Which one? What are the changes?
It's the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. It's more than 50 years old, and it requires federal agencies to consider the environmental effects of projects before approving them. It also gives the public and interest groups the right to comment on that process. Both fossil fuel and even renewable energy developers think NEPA needs to be changed. They argue that it takes too long to get new projects built around the country. And this debt ceiling legislation puts time limits on environmental reviews. Even the most complicated reviews would have to be finished within 2 years. And it gives agencies more discretion to decide what projects trigger this type of NEPA process. So more projects could be exempt in the future.
So damn, 2 years. I think somebody in chat said it was 5 to 7 years before. I don't know if that's true. Capped it at 2 years. Jesus.
Hang on, if I'm hearing you right, that would make the review process go faster. That seems like a good thing.
Well, environmental advocates say that these changes could also make it more difficult for people to participate, which is the whole gig with NEPA, especially folks from marginalized communities that have historically suffered the most harm from these big energy projects. Overall, though, these changes are much less dramatic than what Republicans in the House had pushed for. They wanted to rescind many of the clean energy tax credits that were part of that big climate-focused budget bill that passed last year.
What was the name of that bill? Was it the infrastructure bill? Where did the clean energy tax credits come from? The energy parts of the bill, apart from Mountain Valley Pipeline, are changes to the NEPA guidelines. Like how many pages a report has to be when they submit for a pipeline, from 200 plus to 90, to make it easier for stuff to be gone through and lowering the process. Here's a link for more info. Oh, the Inflation Reduction Act.
So upgrading the electric grid, the country's electric grid, was part of the negotiations for this deal on the debt ceiling. Where did that land?
For the country to transition away from fossil fuels toward cleaner energy like wind and solar power, that's going to require building a lot more new transmission lines and other infrastructure. Democrats were hoping for something to make permitting those kind of projects easier and faster, but in the end, the legislation includes just a study about transmission issues. The White House says talks about overhauling the country's permitting processes for big energy projects will continue, but that broader conversation is going to happen separately from efforts to get this debt ceiling legislation approved in the coming days.
Jeff Brady from NPR's Climate Desk, thanks for your reporting.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And now, more.
Boost to permitting. The overall length of review process was 80 months from around 2011. Damn. Is there anything really bad about this Mountain Valley Pipeline? Like, is there like a special reason why it's horrible, or is it just people just don't like pipelines in general? Natural gas pipeline I'm sorry, fuck. I mean, this is all I need to do a whole day on this. Isn't natural gas, like, in general, like, pretty based? This is a pipeline for natural gas. Right? Or isn't natural gas, like, generally pretty good? Like, if you compare it to, like, oil, or if you compare it to coal? Opposition was met during the initial request to obtain a certificate of convenience and necessity from the FERC. Some of the issues raised by citizens include the right of eminent domain and the potential for a negative impact on forest, waterways, and protected wildlife during construction. Concerns were raised because the route cuts across the Appalachian Trail. Okay. Activists have set up numerous blockades around construction along the pipeline path, including a month-long tree sit near Peters Mountain, an aerial blockade in which a woman occupied a platform atop a hole for 57 days. Other aerial blockade. What is an aerial blockade? Like people fly drones? Or in the 932-day Yellowfinch tree sit. Protesters have also blocked construction by parking junk cars in the pipeline route or locking themselves to machinery. I feel like my feeling is it just like everybody, like progressives wish that they could snap their finger and stop the construction of all new pipelines. Like that feels like where we're at right now. What is their alternative? Is it all just like air and solar or wind and solar or? The head of the Jefferson National Forest was reassigned, allegedly due to heavy-handed attacks following the protests, which included running ATVs on a section of the Appalachian Trail and blocking food and water supplies for protesters. In Virginia, bumper stickers are appearing on cars that read "No Pipeline." Many articles against pipeline have been published in the Roanoke Times. Many protests have been organized. APPs have been set by government agencies for violations of Virginia's Stormwater Management Act because of problems with runoff from land clearing while installing the pipeline. The pipeline was challenged in court, including lawsuits during 2018, which cultural preservation offices failing to satisfy the requirements of the National Historic Preservation Act after they found evidence of burial mounds along the path of the pipeline. Oh my God. Kill me. These lawsuits are thrown out by federal courts in February of 2019. Many landowners complain they are kept up at night by construction. All right, what else?
Easier to get these energy projects, these fossil fuel projects through. And you're so right, Cenk, in that anytime there is an effort to pass legislation that would help ordinary people, once it fails, it fails. We never hear about it again. But when it comes to projects like Joe Manchin's, Mountain Valley Pipeline, it's never dead. They'll find. Why does this,
I don't understand, why does this pipeline not help ordinary people? Aren't like costs of energy, aren't costs of energy like some of the most important things that ordinary people pay for? Like, is that not an ordinary person's thing?
Find a way, they'll find any opportunity to sneak these provisions in and get what they want, because as long as it benefits the wealthy, as long as it benefits corporations, as long as it benefits, honestly, members of Congress who stand to profit off of it themselves, they'll get it through. They'll get it through. That's exactly what happens every single time. It's just, I don't understand what Democrats plan on campaigning on. Like, what are they? No, but seriously, like, let's have a real conversation about this, okay? Because when it comes to corporate giveaways, when it comes to aiding and abetting corporate greed, Democrats are right there with Republicans at this point. They're pro-corporate, they're pro-austerity, they're pro-screwing ordinary Americans and redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top. There's no difference at this point when it comes to the pro-corporate policies. So what are they going to campaign on? The rhetorical stuff they engage in when it comes to cultural issues? And I say rhetorical because take a step back and really think about what they've done for the various disenfranchised.
I think there's a documentary where they were fracking around residential areas and they could turn on their water faucets and there was gas coming through. What fossil fuel do you get while fracking? Oh, fracking is for natural gas. Yeah, I thought it was for shale gas. Fracking shale gas wells. Hydraulic fracking is a technique used to enable the extraction of natural gas or oil from shale and other forms of tight rock. Gotcha.
As communities that they purport to care about. Seriously, ask yourselves, what have Democrats done to improve these people's lives? Nothing. It's just rhetorical garbage. So, I don't know, am I supposed to hang my hat on the Democratic Party because of their rhetoric?
No, you know what they're going to run on. Everybody knows it. We're not Trump.
Trump is so scary. But,
we're not Trump.
But Biden has implemented many of the policies or extended many of the policies from the Trump administration.
Corporate tax rates extended.
The immigration policies.
Tax cuts, for the rich extended. Immigration policies extended. We can go on and on and on and on. But look, they're going to go to their two favorite places. One is we're not as bad as Republicans.
Except they kind of are.
No, because Trump tried to end democracy. So, okay. That's how low the bar is for Democrats now.
So
we didn't also try to end democracy, vote for us, and then they go to their second trick, which is the most effective trick by far and has worked every time until.
Is he going to bring up minorities or is he going to bring up LGBT?
And we don't know. It might work again, which is they just get the mainstream media to lie. 24/7 on their behalf.
Okay.
Biden's a progressive hero. Biden is FDR 2.0. Biden has accomplished more things than any other president in human history. I mean, these insane, ludicrous lies. And but they get people to believe it because their propaganda is much more sophisticated. I got to tell you, last two tricks here. One is on student debt. They're like, in fact, the article I read from Time Magazine says Biden refused to retreat on his plan to cancel up to $20,000 of student debt. Refused to retreat. It makes him sound strong. So did he get anything? No. He actually gave more to the Republicans. He says, you know how we were not collecting interest on all the loans because of COVID, et cetera, on the student debt? Okay, Republicans, you win. I'm going to give you that. We're going to start collecting the interest again at the end of the summer. Okay. Well, how about the refusal to retreat on the 20,000? No, that's irrelevant. The Supreme Court's deciding that, and they're going to decide it pretty soon. And very likely they're going to rule against Biden, and Biden knows that. So he now retreats on student debt and gives Republicans more, takes away from students. So later, when the Supreme Court rules against him, he's going to go, oh, golly gee, I tried. Make sure you tell everybody how epic I am, okay? But God, there was nothing I could do. Oh, did I give away the interest rate forgiveness too? I guess I did, didn't I? How about going to compromise it was? Well,
so the interest rate stuff, that was going to expire at the end of the summer anyway, right? There was no...
What did Democrats get? Zero. Guys, there are facts in the world. Mainstream media, they actually write it in their articles. Like you go line by line, you cannot find one thing the Democrats got. But the headline says, amazing compromise.
Bipartisanship.
Okay, last trick. So they go, I see it all over social media now, establishment Democrat like fanboys. Like, oh, well, Jake, how could you say this was a bad deal? The Republicans are complaining about it. Yeah, no crap, Sherlock, to put it somewhat politely. Guys, this is part of the game. I've covered this for 25 years straight. Republicans demand something outrageous. The Democrats can just ignore it, like use the 14th Amendment. There's 1,000 ways to ignore it, right? Democrats choose to enter a negotiation they don't have to enter into. Then they give away more and more and more and more. And at the end, the Republicans go, not enough. Oh, this is outrageous. And they ask for one more egregious thing. And guess what the Democrats do? And now I will predict it ahead of time, as we always do. And we are almost always right. If the mainstream media is wrong, right, and we're wrong, and we're the radicals, how come we're right on the facts every single time? So I will tell you right now, the Republicans in the House will vote this down. There'll be a panic. And they'll say, oh my God, we got to do something now. And Biden will give them more. Because that's what he always does here. In fact, I'll do a fun prediction for what he'll give them. This one's like, because he can give 1,000 different things, so this one's not guaranteed. But my guess is he'll move the IRS defunding he moved it from 0 to 10 billion to 20 billion. Now I think he'll probably move it to 40 billion and give away half of the IRS funding because they don't want to audit the rich. The one thing I gave them credit on was, it turns out, a sophisticated trick where they were just going to pull the football later.
Yeah, and look, the GOP's tactics are enviable. They're never satisfied. They always demand more. And Democrats, because of the fact that they're bribed by the same people, are always willing to give more. And so that's exactly how this is going to play out. I have no doubt about it. And I'm just curious, all of the people celebrating Biden right now on Twitter or social media, have they bothered to read anything?
No.
Have they sat down? Have they had the discipline to just sit down and actually read the details of the deal?
If they have, show me one thing Democrats got out of it.
No, seriously, that's such a great question. Seriously, maybe we're missing it. What did Biden and the Democrats get out of this deal?
There are facts in the world. They got nothing. Mainstream media wants to present alternative facts to you, just like Fox News does.
You know what? I apologize. There is one thing Biden got. He made a deal with the devil, specifically because he wants to focus on campaigning for re-election. So because of this deal, if it gets through, will not have to worry about raising the debt ceiling next year as he's campaigning.
Yeah, but that's still nothing. Because he doesn't have to worry about it by just using the 14th Amendment. And we were done with this conversation months ago.
No, you're not getting it. I know it's nothing. Yeah. But it's something that Biden wants for his own purposes, for his own political aspirations, for his own narcissism.
No, you're absolutely right. And if we're framing it that way, then Biden also got a lot of things he wanted. He wanted to cut from the poor and the middle class, and he wanted to give it to the rich. That's what he's done his entire career. He also got that. Jesus. He wanted an excuse to do nothing the next 2 years. He got that. He got an excuse to do nonstop campaigning. So Biden got a lot of wins. The Republicans got a lot of wins. But the American people got screwed. And who told you that? Certainly not the mainstream media. They told you Joe Scarborough was beside himself, ecstatic for how much he loves this deal. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it.
It is true that Democrats didn't really get anything in this negotiation. But I mean, all Democrats were probably looking to do were, one, avoid a debt default. And then two, realizing that they lost the majority in the House, try to not lose too much in terms of staving off said default, right? What have our budgets been? U.S. budget history, United States. Can somebody give me like a discretionary spending U.S. Oh, how is this hard to find? This looked like it went to 2019. Oh, okay, hold on. I'm sorry, 2022 at least. Holy Christ. Am I really reading this correctly? Is it 1.7 trillion? Oh, I'm not thinking of, I'm not, That's a really big discretionary spending budget, right? Trends in discretionary spending as a percentage of GDP. Oh, well, I mean... Okay. So you would argue that what you would argue is that Democrats got massive budgets. We have had massive budgets. We get to hold on to those, and we didn't really give much in terms of alleviating this debt crisis. Okay. The Young Turks think the U.S. defaulting would mostly hurt the rich, and that's why the Republicans would never allow it. Interesting. Let me just summarize. Summary argument. Democrats have been spending massive amounts of money, passing tons of expensive legislation while Biden has been in office. A negotiation with Republicans once the House was lost was expected to avoid a default on the debt. Almost all political pundits and analyzers, what would you say? Analysts, not analyzers. Have to give far, far more in this fight than they actually did. Losses in many cases were minimal or just symbolic. What didn't Republicans get? 0 cuts to Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, no repeal. I wrote down no repeal to student loan reform, but there hasn't been any student loan reform. What did I mean there? No repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden signed an EO for debt relief. Did the debt relief actually pass through, or is it still being challenged? Okay, so it's still going through the courts. Okay. 3% cap on next 2 years of defense spending. It's 3%, right? Spending for discretionary spending. What is the cap on discretionary spending over? Is it 1%? Is that what the cap was? Or was it, it's 1%, okay. Ben Shapiro raved about how good this deal was. Oh, I'm curious what Ben Shapiro, that would be interesting. Ben Shapiro ranks the most woke corporations. 1 day ago, 300,000 views. The truth behind the debt ceiling agreement 5 days ago, 186,000 views. Republicans do not give a fuck about policy, dude.
Well, it was always going to happen. The debt ceiling was going to be raised and some sort of debt crisis was going to be averted, mainly because it was not really in anybody's interest for the debt ceiling to be hit. It was not in Republicans' interest for the debt ceiling to be hit because every time that has happened, it has not really redounded to their benefit electorally. And it certainly was not in Joe Biden's interest for the debt ceiling to be hit because if a recession hits on his watch, then it puts his re-elect efforts in jeopardy. So the only question was going to be whether Joe Biden was going to cave or whether Kevin McCarthy was going to cave. Now, we have to define the terms of what it means to cave here. Okay, so there are a few different descriptions of what it could mean to cave under these circumstances. Okay, number one, the real definition here is Joe Biden set the groundwork. Joe Biden said, I will not negotiate. He said it over and over and over. I'm not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. I'll negotiate over the budget. I won't negotiate on the debt ceiling. His entire team went out there and for 97 days said they would not negotiate on the debt ceiling. And then he negotiated on the debt ceiling and actually gave away some fairly significant concessions to Kevin McCarthy. So that is one definition of caving. If, however, you wish to take another definition of caving, and that is Republicans going along with any part of the Democratic agenda, that basically Republicans should have threatened to shut down the government until Joe Biden became Ronald Reagan, or better yet, until he became Calvin Coolidge. If that was your definition, then presumably McCarthy caved. And so the question as to how you view this debt ceiling bill is largely about the gauge against which you gauge the bill. Okay, so the measure against which you gauge the bill. So are you trying to measure?
God damn it. We'll see how this commentary goes. I like that Ben Shapiro gives like he starts off clearly defining the terms. Like, well, if your goal was for Biden to become conservative when it comes to spending, then you probably aren't going to be happy. If your goal was to have Biden negotiate it all when he previously didn't, like, it's nice that he lays out very clearly like both sides here. We'll see what his analysis is like.
Debt ceiling compromise bill against what you wish would happen, like what would be the best possible outcome, or are you trying to measure it against the worst possible outcome? The worst possible outcome here would have been for Republicans to simply cave to Joe Biden, give him the clean debt ceiling bill, which is what Republicans historically have done, and let him spend as much money as he could possibly want. That would be the worst case scenario for the Republicans. The worst case scenario for the Democrats would have been the Republicans shut down the government, presumably. But that was not going to materialize because, again, that's not even a worst case scenario for the Democrats because they end up then.
I feel like historically Republicans have wanted to play chicken with the U.S. economy and the debt shit. I think we did that under Trump and Obama, but.
Winning elections on the basis of that. So the worst case scenario for the Democrats, presumably, is that Joe Biden caves to the extent that he gives serious, real concessions. Okay, well, if you are looking at who escaped the worst case scenario, Republicans escaped their worst case scenario significantly more than Democrats escaped their worst case scenario. And whenever a deal gets made, this is the essence of deals. Whenever a deal gets made, everyone is unhappy. If a deal happens where one side is very happy and the other side is very unhappy, well, then you know who won the deal. When both sides are kind of unhappy, that's most deals. And again, I think one of the things that you are seeing, we're going to go through the details of the debt ceiling bill that is now going to be voted upon in the House, is very likely to pass. One of the things that you are seeing in the commentariat on the right side of the aisle is proper, true critiques of the debt ceiling bill, of the budgetary process. All the things they are saying are true. We should redo all of the entitlement program. We should be looking at systemic debt in the United States. We should be looking at vastly scaling back the administrative state. Sure, we should be doing all of those things. And in the best of all possible worlds, we would do those things. Also, Joe Biden is the president and Democrats run the Senate. So, in realistic world, were those things going to happen? How much could McCarthy actually pry out of the cold, dead hands of Joe Biden? I mean, that really is the question. And so, again, I say it again. When you look at this debt ceiling bill, I agree with every critique of the debt ceiling bill from the right. It does not tremendously lower the arc of spending in the United States. It does not redo the entitlement programs. It does not suck away all the power of the administrative state. All of that is true. Are you measuring the bill against what you wish the bill would be? Or are you measuring it against what what was possible to get with a Democrat president and a Democrat Senate? Now, I'd like to remind everybody here that Republicans didn't exactly scale back the spending when Donald Trump was president.
True.
And normally what you would say, in a normal sort of political cycle, what you would say is that when Republicans have unified power, meaning the House, the Senate, and the presidency, when they have those things, that is when they should tremendously scale back spending. And yet, ironically, if you look at the history of party politics in the United States over the course of the last 100 years, what you see is that spending actually tends to get scaled back only when there's a split in the government. When Republicans have unified control of the government under George W. Bush, when they have it under Donald Trump, they actually blow out the spending. When Democrats have control of government, unified control of government, they blow out the spending even more. Only when there's a split in government is there any sort of holdback in the...
I feel like that has to be qualified a bit. Like, for instance, like, can we really blame at least the early spending of Biden or Obama on, like, a unified Democratic government when we're coming out of both times? When we're coming out of, like, historic recessions that Republicans have kind of sort of thrown us into? Like, is that really fair? All right, this meme is dead. No more. You guys have lost it. It's too retarded when talking about politics.
The spending. And listen, as somebody who's very fiscally conservative, somebody who believes that the systemic $31 trillion debt problem of the United States will come back to bite us in the ass, I tend to be kind of a pessimist when it comes to the idea that our political actors are incentivized in order to make serious systemic change to our spending. Instead, I think it's very likely that the United States is going to follow the pattern of every other Western country that racks up too much debt. We're going to hit a cliff. When we hit the cliff, we're going to have to take austerity measures. Because when has a state ever sort of hemmed it back in? The last time a state hemmed it back in, I believe, was Canada in like the 1970s. It's been a long time since a
Wait, not gonna lie, there's always some sort of historic recession or something like that. I'm sorry, what? The two historic ones I'm thinking of are 2007 and 2021, like COVID and then the 2007 housing crisis. What was comparable to the 2007 housing crisis? You wouldn't say like the stagflation shit under oh god, was that Reagan? In the 70s. That wasn't as bad as 2007, was it? There was the dot-com bubble burst wasn't as bad as 2007, was it?
Western state looked at itself in the mirror and said, 30 years from now, we're going to have...
And even so, that was like 50 years earlier. Like, I don't know if I would say there's always a historic recession going on, but...
a massive debt problem, and it's going to be a bomb, and it's going to go off in our economy. Let's fix it now. Preemptively solving problems is not what politicians do. They tend to kick the can down the road. So from that perspective, McCarthy forcing Biden to the table, forcing Biden to give concessions, you have to at least say that on a political level, that is a good play by McCarthy. So according to the Wall Street Journal, lawmakers returning to Washington on Tuesday will face intense pressure from leaders on Capitol Hill and the White House to support the debt ceiling bill and overcome opposition on both the left and the right. For now, Biden and McCarthy appear on track to gain enough bipartisan support to suspend the debt limit. The measure could still run into procedural obstacles, complicating the race to avoid an unprecedented default. The legislation's first test comes on Tuesday when it goes before the House Rules Committee, which acts as a gatekeeper for legislation coming in onto the House floor. Two conservative Republicans on the committee, Representative Chip Roy of Texas and Ralph Norman of South Carolina, have said they oppose the deal already. The committee is made up of 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats. So the Republicans could lose a couple of votes and still pass this thing out of the House Rules Committee. We'll get into the details of what exactly is in here and why, again, you can view every one of these bills as a giant failure from the perspective of our government cannot hem itself in. Our government has generated more debt than any government in the history of humanity.
Based.
Probably all governments combined in the history of humanity is the size of the debt that we have run up here in the United States. You can recognize all of that and still recognize that maybe this is the best that that McCarthy could pry out of Biden. Or if he could have pried a little bit more, it wasn't like so much more that you're going to get like an amazingly better deal and avoid the debt limit being hit. I try to be realistic with my audience. Again, the easiest thing in the world when it comes to this business is to take the absolutely purest view that what Republicans should do is completely shut down the government, hit the debt limit, and let everything burn to the ground in order so that what Joe Biden is going to... So what's he going to do? He's going to just revise his entire view of spending? He is the president. He is sitting in the White House. Being realistic about that means that what Republicans should focus on is winning back the White House, winning races as opposed to bitching about Joe Biden being in the White House and the Democrats controlling it. How about we win some races and then we actually do the hard work of governing? That would be the thing that is worth aiming at. And if you can gain some sort of concessions from Joe Biden after he started off saying he wouldn't even negotiate, that seems like a political win for McCarthy at the very least. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, when we here at the Ben Shapiro Show, we are very interested in ensuring that corporate America does not ram their values down your throat. When it comes to this debt ceiling deal, we're going to go through the details in just a moment. Think about the framework you're using to examine the deal. Measure it against what you wish American government worked like, the deal's crap. Measure it against what you can get out of Joe Biden, the deal may be the best that you can get out of Joe Biden. You can hold those two thoughts simultaneously. It's not the best deal in the world because that deal was not available. Joe Biden is a very bad president. The Senate of the United States is run by Chuck Schumer. All those things you can hold in your mind at the exact same time. I remember this is sort of a recapitulation of a battle that happened all the way back in, 2014, when Senator Ted Cruz from Texas decided that he was going to essentially hold up the budgetary process in order to shut down funding for Obamacare. And a lot of Republicans cheered him on because they said, okay, well, he's going to force Obama to make some sort of concession. And instead what happened is, was Obama going to ever repeal Obamacare on the basis of Ted Cruz filibustering? Very unlikely, considering that, again, Barack Obama was the president and Obamacare was named after him. And in that case, you can at least say that Cruz was speaking on behalf of a party that had control of the House and the Senate at the time. In this particular case, the Republicans don't even have control of the Senate. They have a very slim control of the House. So prying concessions out of Joe Biden on this sort of stuff, it's not a massive victory, but it's definitely a victory over Joe Biden, which is why Joe Biden was resisting it for so long. Okay, so to understand what is exactly in this debt ceiling deal, you have to understand how spending works in the United States. So the way that spending works in the United States, there's two types of spending. There's mandatory spending and there's discretionary spending. A mandatory spending, which amounted to 31% of the federal budget back in 1970, now constitutes about 2/3 of the federal budget. In 1970, that would be Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Okay, those programs alone, that's the mandatory spending in the United States, meaning it's already written into the law. Unless you restructure those entitlement programs, you're not touching that. That represents 2/3 of federal spending year on year in the United States. Then you have discretionary spending, which used to be the vast majority of spending in the United States. And believe it or not, defense is not mandatory spending. Defense is discretionary spending, meaning it's decided on every single year. It's not written into the law. You have to have a budget process where you decide how much money to allocate to defense. Defense represents something like 45% of all discretionary spending in the United States, and the rest is split among all of the various other elements of the government. So again, the amount of discretionary spending as part of the budget is actually fairly low at this point. All debt ceiling bills are designed to lower discretionary spending because no one is actually touching the entitlements. Entitlements are the third rail of American politics. You say obvious truths, like Social Security is not sustainable. The demographic base of the United States is not large enough to sustain Social Security. The economy is not growing fast enough to sustain Social Security. Social Security, for example, should be converted for people under the age of 50 to private savings account.
It sounds like Ben is trying to both sides it, but like, yeah. Okay, I feel pretty confident here. I think this is probably, the Democrats probably did decent, or more than decent, I think, on this.